This is the Jedburgh podcast. I'm the host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning, no matter the challenge. The Jedburgh podcast is founded in the lineage of the Special Operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is sponsored by Talent War Group, an executive search and talent advisory. Visit talentwargroup.com for more. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. Recognizing that I volunteered as a ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession, I will always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high esprit de corps of my ranger regiment. This is the first stanza of the Ranger Creed. This and the following 5 stanzas set the uncompromising standard for leadership in any organization. Ranger School and the Ranger ethos have defined military leaders for over 70 years. But until 2016, the opportunity to earn a Ranger qualification was limited only to men. In this episode, I'm joined by Lisa Jaster, one of the 3 women to attend the first integrated Ranger School class. Lisa is Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. She's an executive in private sector engineering firms, and she's a role model for fitness at the most elite level. Most of us who earned our Ranger tabs were in our 20s, men, and from combat arms branches like infantry or special forces. Lisa graduated at 37 years old, a mother of 2, a woman, and an engineer. She also faced the utmost mental and physical challenges of resilience as she recycled every phase of the course, being forced to do every exercise again. Lisa had the complete opposite experience I did in Ranger School. And in our discussion, we highlight the difference between those who say and those who do, the importance of physical preparation, the optionality of quitting, and what it means to truly build an organization on uncompromised standards. Lisa also shares her 3 C's of leadership, what it means to delete the adjective when it comes to women leaders, and how leaders must earn respect every damn day. We'll also tie the Ranger Creed to your organization and prove that regardless of where you come from, Rangers lead the way. Lisa, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I'm really excited because this is our first in-person recording with you and the Talent War Group.
Yeah.
Right, so we did one episode earlier that was in person with episode 6 with Dr. Claudius Conrad, but that was not with Talent War Group and the people who are actually sponsoring our podcast. And now that COVID is opening up the world, we have an opportunity to come down here to Austin. Really excited to meet with you, really excited to meet the team and tell your story.
Very excited to be here, especially after we've done plenty of LinkedIn Lives together.
Oh, I know. I feel like I know you so well. And then now to actually shake your hand, I'm like, oh my God, it's her. She's alive. She's real. So Lisa, the Jedburgh podcast is about trailblazers, visionaries, drivers of change, those dedicated to winning. And your story is close to my heart. And it's close to my heart because attending and completing Ranger School is one of, if not the highlight of an Army career. At least it was for me. I graduated in January of 2005, and it doesn't matter how long ago you went. I was just speaking with a former Army general who's going to come on sometime in the fall, and he said to me, I went to Ranger School in the 1970s, and he started telling me stories about it. And so it's just this part of you that it was yesterday, and it doesn't matter if it was yesterday or if it was 10 years, 15 years, 30 years. And obviously everybody always says, oh, so you went when it was hard.
Of course.
Because you do still feel the cold. You still feel the hunger, the tired whenever you think about it. You remember the lessons. You remember the camaraderie, the bonds between you and your Ranger buddies. You forever tell the stories. And we're going to get into it. And although our stories are diametrically different in how we went about Ranger School and how we executed these, what is supposed to be 61 days, it's really exciting to sit here and speak with you, one of the first female graduates of the course, and tell your story and relive some of my glory days, because I don't feel the same way that I did when I was back in 24 or 25 years old.
Right.
So the U.S. Army defines Ranger School as one of the toughest training courses for which a soldier can volunteer. Army Rangers are experts in leading soldiers on difficult missions. And to do this, they need rigorous training. For more than 2 months, Ranger students train to exhaustion, pushing the limits of their minds and their bodies. That's how Ranger School is defined by Ranger Training Battalion in the U.S. Army. From its inception during the Korean War in 1951 through 2015, only men were allowed to attend Ranger School, and in most cases, only men from combat arms. And those are branches of infantry, armor, special forces, field artillery, engineer, aviation. Ranger School was not optional for infantry officers. I was an infantry officer before I was a special forces officer. It was a position that you were put in as an infantry officer where if you wanted to end your career before your career started, all you had to do was march into the office of the regimental commander and tell him, sir, I don't want to go to Ranger School. Right. And there's these apocryphal stories of him where he would pull out a knife and cut your branch insignia, your cross rifles that designated your branch on your shoulder, on your lapel, and he would cut them off and say, that's it, you're out of the infantry. When I got to my first unit in 4th ID, my battalion commander had been a Ranger battalion officer multiple times. He fired the platoon leader in charge of my platoon the day I got there because that guy didn't have a Ranger tab and I did.
Wow.
And so you hear these stories about how impactful this is, but there were these stigmas around women in combat arms, women in combat in general, women in the Army, and especially women earning and competing to win one of the most elite designations in the military. But in 2014, the decision was made to pilot a class with women. The first stanza of the Ranger Creed reads, quote, recognizing that I volunteered as a Ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession, I will always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high esprit de corps of my Ranger regiment. So can you talk about the Army's decision to allow women to Ranger School, and why did you volunteer?
That's quite a loaded question. Speaking on a very big and grandiose scale, the Army's decision, one of the things that the Army has said is that Ranger School is a leadership course. Well, if you're going to have leaders, then they have to be able to attend the Army's most rigorous leadership course, regardless of what that course is. So if women are even in the discussion that we can be capable leaders, to deny us access to the Army's most rigorous leadership training course is to kind of say exactly the opposite, that women aren't allowed to be leaders. So I think the Army was looking at it that way. Is it a leadership course or is it a combat arms training course? So that's the first thing. The second thing about opening it to women is the wars that we're fighting, that our peers were fighting, that our predecessors even were fighting. We don't have a front line. We're not doing a defense in depth where the women are in the rear with the gear and you have the nurses corps, you have your doctors, your medics, even non-combat arms females, completely accessible to the quote-unquote front lines. All of that being said, my reason for attending personally wasn't quite as grandiose. It was hey man, I think I can do this. Like, this is something I can do.
It was a challenge.
It was a challenge, and it was, hey, if I'm going to say that I'm a leader in the military and I want to go as high as I can as a reservist, I'm not active duty anymore, but if I'm going to ascend the ranks, then I need to test my mettle. And I also need to be in the conversation. So just like you said with your example of having a tab, people look at you differently because you attended that school. They just automatically, whether it's the shared experience, if they're a Ranger School graduate, or the respect because the military, not just the U.S. military, but other NATO forces also respect the Ranger School tab, and they respect that school, and they send students from some of our allied nations to attend the school. Well, I can't even get a seat at the table if I'm not in that same cool kids club, for lack of a better terminology. And so I did want to go when the opportunity arose, but oddly enough, the first thing I said to my sergeant major, who was the one who sent me the ALARAC, saying, hey, you can go and we think you should. The boys have all been talking about it, and at the time, Major Lisa Jaster should be in the conversation. I actually giggled at him. I said, you've got 25-year-olds. The average age at graduation is 23 years old for men. I was 36 going on 37. Why the hell would they want to send me when the other potential candidates are in their prime and they're young and they're climbing?
The target demographic for the school is early to mid-20s, male, combat arms. I mean, I was an infantry officer. I was 24 and 25 years old, I think, at the time. No, I was 24. So you're 37. You're a mother of two. You're a major. Everybody's a second lieutenant. Maybe somebody who's now there for the second or third time is a captain. Rarely do you see a major. You see junior non-commissioned officers who are early in their careers. It's also even out of an engineer background, is not a common background to come into. You're more out of infantry. You're a lot of aviation guys who go into special operations aviation regiment, go to ranger school, or they're serving in ranger battalion, or they're in special operations. Most people don't have kids or families. And even a lot of guys who go and have a girlfriend, sometimes they don't have a girlfriend when they get back, depending on how long they spent there. And you have all these things. The other piece is that historical graduation data from years and years, decades, show that the older you are and the more senior you are in the military actually leads to worse performance in the school and a greater chance of failure. And you said, quote, "I was like a unicorn. I looked different, sounded funny, and was older. A mother. When soldiers saw me, they didn't know how to react. We were test dummies. I felt like we were poked and prodded a bit. We were an experiment. We were weird, and nobody knew if we were going to be successful." So how does this position out as a major, as a woman, as a mother of two, as a wife, how did that affect your decision to go? And then also your performance while there?
So I'll start with the end. The performance while I was there. So one of the things to consider is I wasn't an infantryman, but as a combat engineer or just as an engineer, I'm currently in battalion command. That experience at Ranger School helps me to help my commanders develop plans, develop orders that support the infantry's mission. And there's all these jokes, there's all these memes. Yes, infantry leads the way, but only after engineers clear the way. So infantry says they're in front, but they can't move very far if there's a minefield in front of them. So it's one of those things to consider is the benefit to me, even as a more senior officer, is I'm planning missions and executing missions that help those small unit tactics actually occur. So going back into the whole why and kind of getting myself talked into it, I needed to be there as an older individual with all of that baggage to prove a point. Because I think since CrossFit became a thing, people are seeing that women are physically capable of a whole heck of a lot more than anyone's ever thought of. If you watch the CrossFit Games or you watch any of these elite athletes, but CrossFit because it demonstrates the usable muscularity of women versus bodybuilding, which shows muscles, but actually functioning with those muscles and doing something with them. Nobody doubts that women can physically get through Mel Vesti obstacle course or the Derby obstacle course. That question isn't there anymore, but now can women do it sustained? Okay, well, if a 22-year-old woman can do it sustained, your E7 platoon sergeant, as a female, isn't 22 years old. So that infantry platoon sergeant is a little bit older. And your captains, and as a reservist, a lot of my soldiers are older. In the Army, if you've got an E4, they're in their early 20s, late teens. Well, in the reserve, they could be 40, and they could be a specialist. And we expect them to do the exact same mission. So having somebody who's 37 years old, 2 kids, and a whole life outside the military, being able to go to that school and complete it. And I actually think it's to the military's benefit that it took me so long to complete it. Because as you said in the description of the school, it is lack of sleep, lack of nutrition. It's hard work. It's physical. It's mental. There's an academic aspect to it. And to be able to do it for an extended period of time at 37, I think I negated a lot of the arguments that, well, women might be able to do it physically, but they can't last in austere environments, or they can't meld with their 22-year-old peers.
And that feeling ran deep in the Army. I mean, I remember in our graduation all hands, right before we graduated from the infantry officer basic course, a 1-star general came and spoke to us. Now, this was back in 2004, and I won't say his name because I'm sure he's retired now, but he would have immediately been fired on the spot if it was today's world. But he got up in front of the group, and this is 200 students. And he gets really quiet after he's telling a story about the importance of Ranger School. And he says, "Do you know what the Army's talking about now? They're talking about letting women go to Ranger School." And then he looks around in this building tension in the room, and everyone's thinking, "Oh, don't say it, don't say it." And he says, "Not on my watch.
Oh,
not on my watch." And even then you're thinking, is that really the way the Army's thinking about this right now? Because the conversation had started well before 2014. Yeah. It had started, and that was 10 years before that. And they were talking about this. But that was how institutionalized some of the Army organization was in actually having progressive thought that women can contribute a lot to this organization. And so we finally get there, and that manifests in you going there, even at 37. And there's an interesting piece of this because as a young officer or a young non-commissioned officer or soldier who goes to the school, there is a sense of naivety. As a second lieutenant sitting there in the room with this general, I didn't know anything. I'd never been to a unit. I knew only the schoolhouse. And I had said, oh, okay, well, naturally the next step is I go to Ranger School and I do this thing and I do whatever they tell me to do. And you still have this fear of the instructors. You still have the fear of the Army. You don't know what to expect. But as a major, when you go and you have this knowledge of something like I'm looking at the instructor and the instructor is a mid-level non-commissioned officer or even a captain or a junior officer, you outrank these people significantly. You have more years in the Army than these folks. Your breadth of experience is more. Do you think that helps, or do you think that hurts, or do you think that in a situation as rigorous as this, is there a benefit to naivety where you just start, Sergeant told me to do this. I'm gonna put my head down. That's the only way I know how to do it. Whereas if you're more experienced, you look at it and think, I would never actually do it that way.
Right. I had the same situation actually with grad school because I was a non-traditional graduate student when I went to get my master's. And you had the young individuals who came straight from their undergraduate and whatever the teacher said went. Well, I had been working construction already for 7 years. So when somebody said, well, this is how they test the soils in the field, you just roll your eyes and say, no, that hasn't been done since whenever you entered the classroom. But thank you, Professor Time. And the same thing was true at Ranger School. It was a help and a hindrance. But I think, as you all know and anyone else who attended, one of the most complicated parts of Ranger School is the mental aspect of the school. And that's where being more mature and long in the teeth actually helped. Because what happened is when I'm looking at an E6 who's yelling at me, I know that he's going to go home, kiss his babies, drink a beer, watch the game, that he's just a person and he's playing a role. But if you've only been institutionalized, that Ranger instructor thinks you're a dirtbag and he hates you and he's going to go home and mull over it. But at 37, I know he's going to go home to his wife and kids and his life. And this doesn't matter to him. He's going to see another class in 3 weeks. So that helped me compartmentalize that aspect of the type of instruction you get at Ranger School. The other thing that was really helpful to me is a lot of the females specifically, this was a first. We were drawing a lot of attention. But with my life experience, I was able to look around and say, well, the Hispanic guy, it's a lot of white males, let's be honest. The Hispanic guy or the dark-skinned guy or the guy with glasses or the handful of guys that are a little chubbier. Because it's amazing. Ranger School's got a bunch of really lean, mean fighting machines. And then you've got some kind of big guys that float easy during the combat water test. And
well, everybody comes out at the end, though, looking generally the same.
Yes. But you got these guys coming in.
Minus all the excess weight that they have on their bodies.
Yes, but anybody who sticks out on that first week during RAP week while you're getting tested and assessed, if you're a little bit heavy, if you have glasses, if your skin color's different, if your hair's different. I had another redhead, which of course later got made fun of for being my son because he was young enough to be my son. But any of these things that make you stick out brought the ire of the Ranger instructors because their eye caught you. So as a female, if I sat there and noticed, wait, our eyes are yelling at me for my push-ups, but these 7 guys next to me are doing just as bad form on their push-ups. Well, I stuck out. And so I was able to recognize some of those differences that as a 22-year-old, I wouldn't have seen it. It was just that dude hates me.
Well, that was how I felt. I thought the Ranger instructors lived in the woods next to us or something. And then they would walk away, that they would go into their camp in the woods, and then you realize later on, oh, wait, they were like going home.
Yeah.
And going to their families. But like you said, but actually, when you're there and that's all you know, you think that, oh, well, they must be over there eating MREs as well, one time a day. And it really does change your perspective. One of the greatest attributes that I believe you have, and when I've worked with you over the last couple of months and gotten to know you, it's that you're what I call a doer. We did an entire episode on this with Colin Bevan. He was what we call the no impact man. He wrote a book called No Impact Man, How to Be Alive. But he speaks about limiting beliefs and those are barriers to entry. He defines them as barriers to action, barriers to entry into change, that there are certain stigmas that make people believe they cannot affect change. So they don't even try. So they live in this limiting box. And it's not just in terms of societal change, but change in themselves, because change in yourself and identification of who you are really has to be the first step to drive change. And whether that stops at just change in yourself or whether that translates into change in your teams, in your organization or society writ large, you can't affect change in anything until you look inward and say, I'm going to do this first. And one of the reasons why I want to interview Colin was because he's a doer. And as I think about you, I put you in that box because you're not someone who talks about things. You actually then execute and go do it. And so on the way over here, you just told me this story about how you have these 5 firefighting units in your battalion right now.
Right.
And you had a training event and they said, do you want to jump in and train on the fire? And you said, yes. Immediately followed by their response of, well, we didn't actually think you were going to say yes.
Right.
And then they had to figure out, oh, how do we get the boss actually now into a fire suit and then into this fire? And
right.
But they didn't expect that from you. And so shame on them because they should have understood that that was what you were going to do. But you're a doer. You don't shy from these things. And at the time you went to Ranger School, you said you had on your signature block an Einstein quote that said, quote, a ship is always safe at the shore, but that's not what it's built for.
Right.
And then you go on to say that you had always thought of yourself as someone who was willing to, in your words, put myself out there, to go the extra mile, to try to do something that nobody else had tried. But I'd never tested that theory. So this was my opportunity to, instead of having a cute little phrase on my signature block, to actually either put up or shut up. We have previously spoken, you and I, about doers, supporters, naysayers. We did an episode of the Talent War Group LinkedIn Live podcast on it. And doers, as I've defined them, as the ones who understand that their role is to do. They accept that. They drive organizations forward. They carry the load. They make things happen. Supporters know that they have to help the doer. They have to provide the environment. They have to supply the doer with whatever it is that they need. And they're content understanding that they're in the background, but the doer can't succeed without their support. Right. And then there's these naysayers, the people who cast doubt, the ones who believe that often they are the doers and they are the supporters without understanding that you can't be both. And if you think you're both, you're actually neither one. They're the ones who you speak to them about your experience at Ranger School and they'll tell you, oh, I was going to go to Ranger School, but I hear it all the time about special forces. Oh, what did you do? I was a Green Beret in special forces. I was going to go to selection, but, and so these people, they got to go. It's just like at the end of the day, they got to go. And I'm going to ask you what you think about them. But in leadership, and one of the major lessons that comes in Ranger School, which is applicable to any organization, whether it be in the military or civilian world or any team, sometimes you have to be the doer and sometimes you have to be the supporter. And what Ranger School drives into you is the identification, the ability to determine, when am I the doer? And when am I the supporter? When am I in charge? When am I not in charge? And when I'm not in charge, can I be a team member to help the person in charge? Because you cannot lead if you cannot follow. And I think that that is a concept that is critical in organizations in every single industry. And so I'm hoping that you could speak a bit more about this concept and how a leader in your mind identifies when they're a doer, when they're a supporter, and how do you handle also at the end with, how do you handle naysayers in your organization?
Well, naysayers at the end, because I can go on that for that one for a while. With regards to being a doer or a supporter, Ranger School is such a great example because when you're in a leadership position, you're getting graded. And so you're on. And the hard part is when you're tired and hungry and you're not getting graded, you're not in a leadership position, corporate America, if you're not doing the presentation, how do you, when you turn off, avoid shutting down? You can't do a complete power down. You still have to be actively engaged.
Because the people in charge can't be successful if everybody else says, well, I'm out right now.
Right.
Because you are being assessed.
Right.
Always.
By your peers. that's a thing that Ranger School has put in there. Selection, I know, does it as well. But there's this process of peering and grading, and everybody communicates on, hey, would I want to share a foxhole with this guy or gal, as the case may be? And that's actually on the Ranger School peer evaluation is, would you share a foxhole with this person, yes or no? And you click a box. And it's interesting because it's all of the support stuff. And for me, using the Ranger School example, you have the smart Rangers and you have the strong Rangers. I'm fairly strong. I'm not a weak person. But when you have a 5'4" person and a 6'2" person standing next to each other, one may or may not be able to carry a heavier load. But as a field grade officer who's done operations orders since 1996 when I was a cadet, chances are what that E5 has never seen, I can do in my sleep. So can I add value without taking away the shine? Can I still be powered up without being on? And that is a very complicated tightrope to walk, because the idea is nobody knows that you wrote their execution paragraph for their op board, and that whoever's briefing and whoever's up there and is in charge is getting credit for that. And that happens in the business world every single day. Somebody has to be the presenter. Somebody has to be the forefront. And so whether it's Ranger School or corporate America, it's when can you turn that on and off switch to off without powering down, with still being energized, with finding the places where you can flow and you can add value, again, without stealing the shine. Now, being a doer and addressing naysayers are almost the exact same discussion for me, because what I did find at Ranger School, and I found it in other aspects of my life, being I've got a master's in civil engineering, I've done project management, I've worked construction for most of my career, I've worked internationally in countries that don't have a lot of females in management roles. So I've been constantly competing against status quo, against these norms, against the naysayers. And what I have found is if I look somebody in the eye and I try to change their opinion, not of women, but of me, I can make a lot of progress. And I have had people go back to old Facebook posts, old newspaper clippings, online newspaper articles where they've posted things negative about me, comments negative about any of the other females who went to Ranger School, and they've actually gone back and deleted their comments. And a lot of that is saying, hey, listen, I get that you don't believe this could have happened because all you know is the women in your life. You know your mother, you know your sister. Well, your daughter's 11 years old. What would you say if she tried to do it? Well, she can do anything she wants to. She can be president if she wants to. Oh, okay. So if she could do that, if your daughter, if somebody you're caring for and you're raising is powerful enough to make it past whatever glass ceiling that you've put out there, maybe there's another woman somewhere. And of course, there's the specific people that just are completely illogical and they have their opinions based on their opinions and they're not going to listen to anything else. But I had a photographer who completely disagreed, former military. He's like, no way women did this. He had been putting stuff out there on social media. He came and took pictures of me in the gym. He's like, first of all, why are you getting up and at the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning? I said, well, as a working mother of two, that's the time I have. That's the time. And he came, he goes, I'm tired taking pictures. Like he was physically sweating trying to get pictures of my workout. And he wasn't actually lifting any weights. And I changed his mind. And then he went on his very public social media site and said, she changed my mind. And 2 or 3 people went from there. So that's how I deal with the naysayers, is one at a time.
Let's talk about physical fitness. You mentioned that you're a strong person. Anyone who follows you on social media will see that, and I will outwardly tell the world here, you are stronger than I am. Okay, I 100% know that. But physical fitness, physical preparation, they're foundational. They're a mainstay. It's a passion of yours. You mentioned CrossFit. You've competed in CrossFit competitions. You practice jujitsu. You're an advocate for fitness as part of elite performance. And I lump physical fitness into a controllable factor of our lives. There are certain things we can't control in Ranger School selection. We talk about, well, you can't control the weather. You can't control the events that you're going to do. You can't control how much food you have. There are things you can control. Your mental capability, your physical preparation before you get there. Now, you're going to lose a little bit of your physical control when you get there. But by and large, if you can go there and you are in peak physical condition, or if you can do anything in life in peak physical condition, I believe it gives you a longer runway for everything else, because it's all about mental capacity. Everything in life is about how much can I mentally handle? Because a lot of times the body is stronger than the mind.
Right.
And the mind quits before the body will. Now, there are times in injury or whatnot that's not going to be the case. But if you can give yourself an opportunity to delay the point in which you begin to think about physical pain, and you can push that off into the future, then you have more mental capacity to deal with the other stressors.
Yes.
And this was the way that I approached Ranger School. It was the way that I approached Special Forces selection. And it's the way that I approach a lot in my life. And that becomes now a foundational asset that allows me to just think about other things instead of, am I in pain? Do my muscles hurt? Am I sore? Do I want to quit because this, sucks right now?
Right.
And, I don't feel well. You said, quote, training beside me was a huge shock for many of these young alpha males. Here was a 37-year-old mother of two doing as well or better than almost all of them. So talk about physical fitness as a component of your life and what you do, and how do you consistently perform at an elite level when you have all these other things? And you mentioned at 4 a.m., right? That's the time. You do it then or you don't get to it.
Right. So my sister actually has a PhD in behavioral psychology. And when she did her PhD, one of her thesis topics that she was looking at was cognitive health with the addition of cardiovascular fitness. College students getting paid $20 a month or whatever it is, you have to run for 30 minutes 3 times a week and take this standardized test. And those that did the running did better on the test after whatever the time period was. It's an interesting point, but it comes back to what you were saying is physical fitness can be a controllable. Well, also it can control the uncontrollables. So when my mind is racing, when life is crazy, when everything seems to be going wrong, like let's say this past Sunday, I say, hey, honey, I'll be back in 30. Here's my route. Of course, I still give them time, distance, and all that, the details, just in case I don't come back. But hey, I'm going to be gone. And I came back and I had solved all the world's problems. I had helped myself physically, but I'd helped myself mentally a lot more. And I found early in my life, the best type of exercise is the type you do. Well, I've also found that the type I did also helped me clear my brain and kept me focused. So yeah, just as you were mentioning, my mental health, my mental capacity is so much higher if I can push off the pains of the physical. But sometimes the pain of the physical is what keeps me focused. And in all honesty, the 2 sports you named between CrossFit and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if you've ever had a 200-pound guy try to break your neck off or snap your arm,
I have. It's terrible.
Yeah. And then you tap and you say, hey, let's do that again.
And I'm also over 200 pounds. I can't imagine you having to deal with that.
But if you do that first thing in the morning, there's not much worse that's going to happen throughout your day. And I can go back to that. If I do my workouts first thing in the morning, it is a mainstay in my life. It's a mainstay in our family's life. And you had asked about, fitting that in with everything else, a full-time job, being a reservist, the kids. And the husband gets the last bit of me because that's what ends up happening, right? But he still gets some attention in the day. All these things are in the mix. Well, the key for me is physical fitness is part of each of those. If I've got a problem at work, I run on it. If I've got an issue with my husband, hey, can we go chat? Let's go to the gym. With the kids, the way I got ready for rucking through Ranger School was putting my daughter in my rucksack and walking her to daycare. She thought it was the best thing ever. We've got great pictures. We've got great family bonding memories. And I got my training in.
Yeah, I remember doing that for getting ready for selection. I would put my daughter in the Kelty backpack and just walk up and down the hills around my house in Colorado. And,
oh, yeah. She thought it was great.
Yeah, it becomes family time and you're preparing for that goal. It's funny. There's a couple of quotes that I read that you had where they said when somebody wanted to be really hard on a young student, they would look at you and they would say, well, grandma's over there doing the rope climb. What's wrong with you?
Right.
Well, preparation. In Jedburgh podcast motto is how you prepare today determines success tomorrow. And inherent in there is that you have actually some time to prepare. But preparation can be relative. Sometimes we have a lot of time. Sometimes we have a little bit of time. In the military, we called it hasty and deliberate planning.
Right.
And a hasty plan meant, hey, you got a couple of minutes, figure out exactly what you're going to do. And maybe it's not even exactly, but generally what you're going to do, and get over there and start doing it. And deliberate planning, we have a long time window. We have a deliberate process. We have all these steps that we've got to go through and think about all these contingencies versus, deliberate, which might be on the hood of a vehicle. And then they're going to look at everyone and say, all right, go. And sometimes that actually works because you don't have a lot of time to actually start thinking about everything. You know that you were trained. You know you prepared for this type of event, this moment. And now it's just about execution. I have to execute. And if I don't allow all these other things in my head, maybe you do better. Not advocating that you shouldn't plan and utilize all the time that you have to actually make a plan to do something, but sometimes it works out. People spend 4 months, 6 months, a year in preparation for Ranger School. There's entire courses, pre-Ranger courses that are run by Ranger Training Battalion. There's pre-Ranger courses that are run by individual units. And as an infantry officer, you spent 6 months in Infantry Officer Basic course, which is a pre-Ranger course, preparing you to go. You had about 2 weeks. And
right.
And I want to reference something important here. I referenced the first stanza of the Ranger Creed, and now I'm going to give you the second one.
All right.
And the second stanza of the Ranger Creed reads, acknowledging the fact that a Ranger is a more elite soldier who arrives at the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air. I accept the fact that as a Ranger, my country expects me to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other soldier. That is an important stanza because what that means to me, at least, is that you are always in a state of readiness.
Yes.
So talk about the 2 weeks that you had for this hasty plan to get into Ranger School. And where were you mentally, physically, emotionally to quickly flip that switch and say, all right, I'm ready to get at this?
So a lot of people are talking about the physical aspect of a school like Ranger School. But there is another aspect of trying to get into that school, and that is the Army physical process. I had to get my medical records checked off on. Well, I was 37 at the time, 36 going on 37. Had to go to try to get a Ranger School physical as an Army reservist.
Which is the most in-depth physical that the military provides.
Yes, and I had to get the old person version. So there's a second page for people over the age of 35. That's where the 35 came from. So I call up the Reserve Center medical hotline. Hey, I need a Ranger School physical. We don't pay for that. And we definitely don't pay for it for women. I go to, the closest base, which is 3+ hour drive away. Hey, I need a Ranger School physical. So women can't go to Ranger School. So what ends up happening is this is 2 days before Christmas. I asked my husband, I'm like, hey, I need a weapons free from you just for the day. And he's like, okay, whatever you need to do. I took a blank check and took the day off of work, and I went to an emergency care facility with copies of the Ranger School physical that I had printed off online from the interweb and said, help me. I don't care how much it costs. I got to get this filled out, or I don't even get to think about going to Ranger School. And so that's how I got my Ranger School physical done. And so that always be prepared also includes always being willing to do what you need to do to reach your goals and to be a creative thinker and to think outside of the box, and having the support team, which in my case was my husband, being able to say, yeah, you're weapons free. Whatever you need to do, shoot, move, communicate, just get her done. So having that support system, which I started setting up a decade earlier when I found somebody who was okay with all of my eccentricities, all my craziness. He has no issues. He knew, hey, this is something Lisa wants. I got to support her. So that was part of that 2 weeks training. Another part of that 2 weeks training as an Army reservist, I had to get a bunch of stuff signed off on that I didn't do as a reservist. And that's small unit tactics, that's using different types of GPS devices that I hadn't seen since I had left active duty, being able to disassemble and reassemble weapons. So part of that 2 weeks was going to, my husband was a battalion commander. I went to his reserve unit, and one of his full-time guys by the name of Mick Skinta brought in a couple of soldiers, and they taught me how to use the newest equipment and how to disassemble, reassemble weapons I hadn't seen in 5 or 6 years. And then on top of that is the physical. So it goes back to the always be ready is I have to have, if I'm the type of person who wants to be a soldier and wants to be respected as a soldier, I will always believe, as long as I'm putting my uniform on, that a base level of fitness is required. It's not optional. And if that means memorizing the Ranger Creed is done with a 45-pound ruck on my back, walking through the suburbs of Houston, then that's what I do to squeeze it all in. I'm pretty blessed, and I think all the women who went to those first iterations, who went through the first Ranger School, came in fit because we all had that same mentality of the always be ready. And I love that stanza of the Ranger Creed more than any other, because one of the things the Ranger instructors would say very regularly, you could graduate from this school and wear the tab, or you can graduate from this school and bear the tab. So as long as I'm going to continue posting on social media, I'm going to talk about leading from the front, as long as I'm going to continue with my military career, I am going to continue to try to bear that tab, which includes deadlifting. It includes being able to do dead hang pull-ups even after 2 shoulder surgeries. It includes talking to people and being open when a naysayer calls and doubts what I'm doing or posts on social media to say, hey, listen, we've got a great Army that's doing great things, and I've got to be out there and put myself out there. But to do that, I have to always be ready.
And yet, despite it, there remain skeptics.
There does.
And you spoke a bit about some of the skeptics, and I want to dig back into it for a second. But there are people who believe that the system was rigged for females to graduate, for you and the others who graduated in that first class, that there was some politics behind it. It had to happen. The loads were different, in the rucksacks. The tasks were different, that the standards were changed, or they were different between the women and the men. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've spoken to some people who went to your class with you, some of your Ranger buddies.
Oh, wow.
And I can assure you that they have assured me that that is actually not the case, and that they were ones who looked around and said, this is real, and she's doing it. And I know that at times I could not lift my rucksack. And I had just come off of 4 years as a Division I college athlete. And now there were times where I looked at that rucksack and said, I physically cannot lift this thing. And then I would have to sit on the ground, put it on, get on all fours, put a hand up and wait for someone to come and help me up. You've refuted this, obviously, this idea that there were some compromised standards. You also recycled. And recycled means that you did not pass the phase the first time. And so I say they offered you the opportunity to continue training again. And you did that. And you recycled multiple times. And I would say that that's also a testament to the fact that the standards were not compromised, because by definition of the recycle, you didn't meet the standard the first time and you had to do it again. You said, quote, I strongly agree that we cannot let our standards fall or force quotas on our combat units. Yes, we will maintain physical standards, and some women will fail, but the ones who succeed will bring new strengths as well, making their units stronger and more agile. Women don't have to prove they are worthy of this opportunity, but we have to make sure that we don't prove the naysayers right. Can you talk about recycling, the standards, the adversity, and actually the added scrutiny that was put on you because you were a woman in that first class? Because I believe that I hate to say, political conversation went both ways, because there are people who wanted you to fail. And I know that was in the back of your mind. So how did you think about that and not prove those naysayers wrong?
You mentioned when we started this discussion that as an infantryman, it was required for you to go to Ranger School. There was one point in time when all 8 of the women, I call us the crazy 8, but we're the 8 who made it through RAP week, where all 8 of us were about to get kicked out. We had failed patrols. We were getting recycled. The battalion commander had recommended we get kicked out, and we were going up to the brigade commander. And all the women are sitting there, and, of course, these discussions are happening. Oh, they're not going to let a woman pass. Or how can 8 women, most of us having one, if not multiple deployments to Iraq or Afghanistan, being on teams, military police, attack helicopter pilots, combat engineers, how could we not know small unit tactics for none of us to pass? And there was this anger growing. And one of the young...
Within the group of women.
Within the group of women. And I was... Again, being 37, I have a different lens. So I'm tap dancing in between, where we've got people who want us to succeed and we have people who want us to fail. And if either of those occurs for the wrong reason, the whole thing fails. Just if we get passed or we get failed, not own merit, then this whole thing was a waste of time and energy and a whole lot of haircuts. And one of the young infantry soldiers who was assigned to the Ranger Battalion was half in tears because he was in the same line as we are. And he's like, hey, ladies, I know this really sucks for you, but I literally have to find a new job on Monday.
Right, because if he doesn't make it, he's out of Ranger Regiment.
Yes. And he was devastated because, since he was 6 years old and saw Rambo or whatever the movie was, this is what he wanted to do when he grew up. And it put an interesting perspective on the whole gender equality thing and the fact that we were women and there was a political aspect to this. Because there was a political aspect to us as the women, as future women who want to do this. But what impact is it having on the males? And we often forget when you have a underrepresented population that the overrepresented population or the predominant population is also impacted by any of these changes. And that was actually a pretty big turning point for me and how I looked at each situation. And that was the moment where I said, okay, I have to change individuals one at a time. I have to stop thinking us, we women, we 8 women. And that specific day was when the 3 of us were allowed a day 1 recycle to start the school all over. And then the other 5 women ultimately went home. So I'm not sure how much more we want to dig into that.
Well, so let me give you the 3rd stanza of the Ranger Creed.
Okay.
If you see where I'm going with this, there's a couple more to come.
There's 6, right?
Never shall I fail my comrades. I will always keep myself mentally alert, physically strong, and morally straight. And I will shoulder more than my share of the task, whatever it may be, 100% and then some. And I believe that speaks to that conversation that you had internally with yourself at that moment.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
So you're an Army officer, and now I have to rag on the Air Force for just a moment here.
You mean the Department of Transportation?
Yeah. The taxi drivers. Now I'm going to lose.
We love you guys.
Yeah,
we love
now
you.
I'm going to lose all my Air Force listeners. I'm just kidding. We couldn't do without you. I've found myself in many terrible situations where I've had to call upon the U.S. Air Force, and they've gotten me out. So I appreciate all their efforts.
And they have the best DFACs. So
they do.
Yeah.
The Air Force ROTC cadets actually have to memorize a quote from you as part of their training. And that quote is, "There is no quitting. I cannot have quit in me. There was never an option to stop and quit." And you've gone on to since say, quote, "Once you allow quitting into your mind as an option, it will move in, live there, steal your motivation, and eventually defeat you from within." 5th stanza of the Ranger Creed. "Energetically will I meet the enemies of my country. I shall defeat them on the field of battle, for I am better trained, and I will fight with all my might. Surrender is not a Ranger word. I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy, and under no circumstances will I ever embarrass my country." Speak about this optionality of quitting for a second and the factors that would lead someone to give up, because in the eyes of Ranger units, and whether you're in Ranger Regiment or you have earned the Ranger tab, and there is no quit. It's not an option.
So my deep, dark secret is, everyone who went to Ranger School knows this, I took copious notes of every single day of what I ate, what I did, who I liked, and I sent them home to my family because I had young kids and I was actually missing a lot of their life, and I was feeling guilty about it. So I wanted it documented. Well, I'm now trying to compose that and put it down in something other than little green waterproof notebooks that I carry around in a Ziploc bag. It's kind of embarrassing, and they do smell like Ranger School. So I'm trying to put those down in thoughts. And I'm at that point in writing this out where it is my 3rd time going through Darby. And we had just finished Rap Week. It was my 2nd Ranger assessment phase where all the physical individual tasks get tested. And there was a guy the night before our first patrol who starts complaining that his lower back hurts. And the next morning he LOM'd. He quit. And in my notes, the things I wrote about him, like, you went through the hardest part. You went through all the individual, and now it was time to be a team member and work hard and build rapport and be part of this group. And that's when you throw up the white flag. It was shocking to me. And quitting was already in him. He didn't even start off. So somewhere along the line, he had already decided that he wasn't going to make it any further. And the back, your lower back hurts from, it hurts from day one. You're just sore for the entire time.
The bag you pack to bring there.
Yeah, your back's sore at the airport. So for him to quit, the quit was already in there. And I love saying you can't let the quit in because it truly is one of these concepts that if it's not in your head, it's not an option. Like in the military, you always have courses of action. You have course of action 1, 2, and 3. There's always a do nothing option. Well, just make sure there's never a retreat, a quit option. And I had a former infantry brigade commander write me a letter when I recycled Florida. Now, for anybody who knows anything about Ranger School, nobody recycles Florida. It is the worst kick in the teeth you could possibly get. You're 3 days from going home, literally. So I recycle Florida. There was actually quite a few of us, and I am mentally devastated. And I get this letter in the mail. We only got our mail at the end of each cycle. So every 3 weeks, you got 3 weeks worth of mail. I was the last of the females still there, so everybody and their brother who had a feminist or anti-feminist agenda was sending me mail. So I got a ton of mail from people I didn't even know. And I find this little black and white cardstock from this retired colonel, and in there he writes, "Set your quit criteria." And I thought it was an interesting spin on my never quit concept, because there are times in your life where you have to quit. There are times when the failure is a good lesson learned and you need to take the lessons and walk away. And he wrote it out, set your quit criteria. What could you go home and tell your mom, your brother, your sister, your kids, your spouse, hey, I quit for this reason, and you wouldn't feel like an absolute dirtbag? And write them out. And I wrote them in my hat. And if you ever see me in uniform, grab my hat. I always have a bunch of notes in my hat because they're constant reminders. But I wrote in my hat what my quit criteria was. And the only reason I could logically see going home without a tab on my own, by choice, was if I had a compound fracture in my lower body. And that was
sticking out of your leg.
That was it. I actually, that last jump, we were going to jump. A couple of us got scratched, probably a good thing. But one of the guys I was going to jump with was taping his leg because he had a stress fracture in his lower leg. And you don't make it all the way to Florida and quit, even for a stress fracture. Probably not the smartest thing, but that's a whole nother discussion.
That's the mindset you're in.
But setting your quit criteria and setting it on something where you're never going to look back and say, well, I could have, I should have, well, I tried. And that was a great secondary to the never let quit in my mind.
So right now you have over 1,000 soldiers or so under your command. You've led teams in the military. You've led them in the civilian sector. You've worked at major corporations like Shell Oil. You've said, quote, "A leader is someone who inspires those around them to be better versions of themselves." And you have since created what you call the 3 C's: consistency, communication, and competence. And you've said that there's a lot of other aspects of being an effective leader, but these are the necessary starting blocks: consistency, communication, competence. Can you talk about these 3 C's and why are they the foundation of your leadership style?
I'm going to hit up on communication first, because I think that was another thing that is a Ranger School lesson for me, because being 37 with a bunch of 20-somethings, I would get a song stuck in my head and it would make me feel happy, and I'd try to sing it and they'd all just giggle and had no idea.
Be quiet over there.
What the hell are you singing?
Come on, Grandma, we're trying to work.
Right. And it was just a different communication style. If I'm going to get a 22 Ranger bat E4, E5 to help me work on an operations order, I can't sing Alanis Morissette and get him to understand that that means I'm in a good mood today. Like, it's not effective. I have to communicate in such a way that the receiver can receive it. So that's where I am on communication. It's really, really important that the subject that you're communicating to, the person that you're trying to get your message across to, is the most important person in the conversation versus it being an I conversation. I'm going to hit consistency last because that is definitely one of my favorites. Competency. So the interesting aspect to competency, and actually the Talent War Group talks about this a lot, is you can teach skills, you can't teach attributes. Well, those attributes is where competency comes in. Knowing what you don't know, but knowing how to read other people. As an engineer who's done project management for years, I don't need to know electrical engineering, and trust me, I never will. I'm smart. I'm not that smart. But I have to be able to read the people that I'm hiring and bringing in to see if they know what they're talking about and make sure I can read through. I have to have the competency of interpersonal relationships and being able to read through the minutia and build the right team and build the trust in that team so that if they don't know what they're doing, they can feel comfortable coming to me. And then I have to have competencies in my skill sets, which is project management. I have to be a multitasker. I have to understand how the money flows. There's a lot of aspects of my job I need to understand, and I need to know what I don't need to know. What can I farm out? And then my favorite of the 3 C's is always being consistent in how, whether it's how you communicate or your decision-making process. If I come to work one day and I'm outrageous and I've got a really high risk tolerance and, hey, let's just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And then the next day I'm disciplining my team for taking those same risks, they don't know what to do. And I become the sole point of failure. They can't act without me because they need constant guidance. A true leader that's consistent, communicates well, and identifies their competencies can lead a team when they're not even there. And I personally am a huge Jim Collins fan. That's the level 5 leadership. Once you walk away, is the unit still as good or better without you constantly present? And that's where the consistency really comes in.
You've also coined the hashtag delete the adjective. We've actually referenced it in multiple other episodes where we've invoked your perspective. And I think it's a very important and very valuable perspective. And it's an important part of a lot of our conversations that we've had here. But this is the concept of removing the quote unquote woman adjective before a title or an achievement. Specifically, I think in a previous episode, Jessica Passman, who is a founder and CEO of a company called Hunter and Esquire, they do recruiting in the cannabis space. She had a great quote where she said, quote, "She is a CEO, not a she CEO." And I think that sums it up very, very well, what you talk about with delete the adjective. In your words, you've said, quote, "I just wanted the same opportunities that my male peers were given automatically. Going to Ranger School was an opportunity to build my repertoire and become the best possible version of myself. I want to be someone who others look up to. I expect more, and that means constantly being more and doing more. I want to be a good soldier, not a good female soldier." So talk a little bit more about delete the adjective, and why have you taken the pulpit on this cause?
We all put ourselves in boxes. I mean, in this room, I am the best female Ranger School graduate.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Absolute fact.
Great. But that doesn't mean if we go head on that you're not going to beat the hell out of me, Fran, in whatever the task is. So if we continue to put our successes in this variety of boxes, then are you ever really succeeding? And then are you really competing? And my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, Umpiano, used to always say to us, well, when you're not winning, you're learning. Well, I want to learn. So if I always put myself in these limited boxes where I'm the best out of a small group of people, then I'm making sure that I win, and I'm not learning. I want to be on par with you, with the other former military that are in talent war group, other people who are out there speaking on a public stage, other engineers, other project managers. I don't want to just be good for this little box of people. And we talk about it in the CEO world and some of those standout positions, the ones that have their picture on the brochure. A better example is we don't go into a hospital and say, well, I want the best female surgeon to work on me. So why are we saying, well, I want a female CEO? It doesn't make sense. We want the best. We want the meritocracy. And what I found with the Crazy 8 at Ranger School is there's a lot of women out there that want to be held to the standard, not the female standard. And it's important to me that other people hear me say, I don't want to be put in those boxes, so that they can feel comfortable saying, no, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to do female push-ups. I don't want to be told that women aren't good at STEM. That doesn't mean denying our adjectives. We can hold on to them. We can celebrate them. but I'm not competing based on an adjective. I'm competing based on those competencies.
I'm glad you brought up the boxes, because I think the boxes are really important. And we do put ourselves in boxes. We did a whole episode with Cleo Stiller about her book, Modern Manhood, where we talked about what we call the man box, which is where historically people like me have put ourselves in this man box. And we say, there are certain elements that society has dictated that we must live by. And if we deviate outside of this box, then we're not a man. And the whole point of understanding this box is to say, well, that's just not true. And that's the learning aspect that you're talking about is once we identify that we live in this box and that's where we are, can we then accept it and say, yep, all right, to this point in my life, I've done this. Maybe I was probably wrong. That's okay. Now moving forward, I'm not going to live in this box. I'm going to understand it. I'm going to break out of it, and I'm going to live a more true, holistic life where I can be much broad in my thought process and in my actions, really, because you want to translate that thought and that acceptance into more positive actions. How can men support the delete the adjective cause and be an advocate for it and help drive it forward?
One of the best things I think has happened to our nation's culture is COVID, because it shook everything up. We suddenly started working virtually. We suddenly started, hey, we have to homeschool. Well, previously, also depending on where you live and where you are status-wise, women took the predominance of the home chores, whether it was taking care of the children, taking care of the house. Men took their masculine, the stereotypically masculine chores. And whether it's bringing home the bacon or, hey, it's time to mow the lawn, that's man's work, it's time to take out the trash. We really do live on this very static line. Well, we can't be that way in COVID. So a lot of people, the demographic you're specifically referencing, has re-looked at life as you work virtually and you see what life at home is. Wait a second here, you're not sitting around watching the kids all day. You're watching the kids, making sure that they're doing something other than watching TV, keeping the house clean, doing the laundry. Hey, can I help out with this? Can I do this? And the lines, the home lines are starting to get blurred, which is a great way for the rest of societal lines in the genders get blurred. But how can males help in the delete the adjective? I think it would be, you don't put me in a box, and look at the individuals. The biggest plea I've always had is don't ask yourself if women can do something, because I'm not your mother. So your mother and I are two totally different people. And same holds true with men. You're not your father. You don't necessarily want to be on week-long business trips every other week, because that's what they did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Doesn't mean that that's what you want to do with your family. And as we blur the lines, as we allow men to blur those lines, it also opens up opportunities for women.
It's been daddy daycare at my house for a year, and I couldn't be happier about it. It's everything I missed with my first child. I now have experience with my second one. So yeah, it's definitely, I agree with you. It's been a complete change. That's how we have to advocate for that. Let's talk about respect and the concept of respect. You've said, quote, respect is earned, never given, unquote. There are many people in leadership positions who believe that because of their position that they are entitled to a certain level of respect, and that they have to walk in the room and be revered, and the room has to go quiet when they walk in. And, it's got to be this, I'm here. Your leader has arrived. In 10th group, we said a lot that you honor the rank, but you respect the person. You've also said you earn respect every damn day, in your words. And you've said, quote, that your daily grind centers on constantly building myself into the leader that my soldiers deserve and will be willing to follow regardless of my rank, not because of it. Soldiers are professionals, but respect and followership generated solely by rank structure is a failed leadership model. The fourth stanza of the Ranger Creed reads, gallantly will I show the world that I am a specially selected and well-trained soldier. My courtesy to superior officers, neatness of dress, and care of equipment shall set the example for others to follow. Speak a little bit more about the concept of respect being earned versus given, And do titles matter? Because I think even in the military, to some extent, people think they do, and they may. But in the outside world, I think that there's a preponderance of people who think that, well, the title has to matter. Speak a little bit more about this in your experience.
The titles put you in a box, and sometimes it helps. So that's another thing with regards to adjectives, titles, anything else. You do get a lot of information, situational awareness. And if somebody comes up to me and they say, I'm a vice president of a bank, I understand that a vice president of a bank is probably in charge of 5, maybe 10 people, depending on the size of the bank. So that's the same as in an engineering firm, maybe a mid-level manager. So the title helps me understand what you do for a living, but it doesn't help me respect you. It gives me your elevator speech in 4 or 5 words. The respect is the example of my firefighters yesterday. I didn't put on the firefighting kit and go in the fire because I wanted them to respect me. Let's be honest. I did it because it's freaking cool.
It was fun.
Like, it is so cool. It was hot. It was sweaty. It was nasty, but it was awesome. And that's why I did it. But what happened later on in the day when I did my little commanderly talk, everybody sat around, you took your blouse off, you tried to stop sweating. Everybody was eating their MREs and drinking their Gatorade. And that little activity that I did only because I thought it was cool, not because I wanted to be a fantastic leader, but because I thought it was cool, allowed them to have a shared experience with me and open up a line of communication that wouldn't have existed had I said no. And although it wasn't a purposeful ploy to get more respect from the soldiers, it's something that, looking back on it today, they gave me great positive feedback that being there, being available, being present is a great way to earn their respect. They didn't care that I was their battalion commander. They didn't care that I had driven 3 hours each way just so I could watch a couple hours of their training. I drove longer than I actually was on site yesterday. None of that mattered to them. What mattered is I borrowed an E4's equipment, a specialist's equipment, put it on, and got sweaty with them. And so that's a great reminder that the people you're trying to lead need to see something in you as a person. And so for me, in the military, it's maintaining that physical standard. With regards to being a public persona, it's if I'm going to bear the Ranger tab, I'm going to have to deadlift, squat, bench press, and do pull-ups until I just can't do them anymore. And I'll have to sustain that. And I need to, because respect is earned. It shouldn't be given. If I did something, checked the block, and never went back and utilized it, I never leveraged the tool that I was blessed enough to get, then I don't deserve your respect. And I believe that personal development isn't just in the physical realm. It needs to be academic. Readership is important. I listened to a book on audio. I was going to say a book on tape. I shouldn't date myself. But I listened to an audiobook on the drive here today. And I've got a book on my nightstand that was written by one of my soldiers. Those are the types of things that it's important to always do something to better yourself, because I can have better conversations with the stranger at a bar or the waitress. I can understand, I can empathize, I can be a better part of my community, and I can be more actively involved with those around me if we have shared experience. And the only way I can do that is to fill every minute of my day with something that's better than watching TV for 4 hours a day.
And readership is something that we've spoken about in the past, you and I, and we did another episode on that, which was, I think we called it readership and leadership. And that was really informative, because even as a participant in that discussion that you led, at first I was kind of like, oh, well, what's she talking about? And then it's like, wait a minute, there's a certain set of enhancing just skills, right, that you can learn if you're constantly bettering yourself through reading. And it's a part of our lives that you do have to work at it. It's very easy for it to become overcome by other events. Oh, well, I don't have time or whatever. And I'll be the first to say that since we started this podcast, I've read more books this year in preparation for these conversations than I've read in the last 5 years combined.
Right.
Because it's always been that thing that comes, I don't have time. I have
it's last on the list.
Stuff. But it is a critical part of leadership. And I want to kind of also dig into almost the opposite side of that coin on that conversation, because we interviewed Michael Scott Moore. Michael Scott Moore wrote a book called 977 Days as a Hostage on the Somali Coast. And he was kidnapped by Somali pirates. And he spent 2 years and 8 months as a hostage. And he had done a tremendous amount of preparation before he went out. And the dichotomy of this story is that he went to Somalia to research a book about Somali pirates and was subsequently kidnapped by Somali pirates for being a journalist there who they believed would command a higher ransom for his return. And he says in his book, in the conversation with me that we had in his episode, that you don't go anywhere as an expert no matter how much reading you've done beforehand. And that was something that he realized in his captivity, very early on in his captivity, that it didn't matter how much planning I had done for this. I knew nothing about these people and these pirates and what their true intentions were and what they were doing. So how do you use reading as a foundation to expand your ability to accept and gain knowledge? But then also there's this element of what we've called effective intelligence, which is you just got to be there.
Right.
And something comes from being on Earth and experiencing it.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we went to Australia with the kids. It was our first international family vacation, and we went to see the Great Barrier Reef. Well, because I'm a horrible mother, they had to read and research the Great Barrier Reef and all these different Aboriginal history and different aspects of a country that they had never visited before. Well, you get on ground and there is no book, no picture that can prepare you for seeing a eel or a shark on the Great Barrier Reef. There's no experience while you're in the water. There's no reading that can prepare you for that. Not quite the Somalia example, but the background that was formed allowed for, in my case, the kids to appreciate what they were looking at, and the fact that, first of all, books were a great window. They could start to envision a place that they may never go to, but then they could actually go and they can compare and contrast the two. Now, in the Somalia case, I bet he had a lot of information in his head that he could at least draw upon as a basis. Yeah, it might not have been accurate, but it probably also kept him sane for 2 years and 8 months, knowing what he knew and knowing what he knew was wrong. And I also feel like even when they're not factual books, even if it's this morning, we were talking about the book, The Hobbit. Somebody just made a reference of second breakfasts. And I said, oh, are we hobbits now? And it was an immediate connection because 10 years ago, I had read a book that they read 2 years ago. And so there's a lot that can be done with regards to readership and leadership, both in seeing new places, visiting the world, learning, professional development, but also in that human-to-human connection and a shared experience where you don't both have to go to ranger school to be able to connect on a certain level.
Back to the respect piece just for a second. You've spoken about the loss of respect.
Yes.
And said that, quote, respect is earned through consistent excellence and small but meaningful achievements over great periods of time. But no matter how you gain respect, you can always lose it. Respect is like trust in that it's fragile and difficult to earn and easy to lose. One drunk driving incident, lewd social media post, or hateful comment could lose hard-won admiration. We must all be careful to not let our talents take us places our character cannot keep us. Unquote. This can happen in a second.
Yes.
It happens to a lot of people. I've lived it firsthand. It's happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't mean harm. And you lose focus at points in your life and you don't think about the things that got you to where you are or the repercussions of certain actions, and you lose sight of that character at times. How do you recover from it? And how do you as a leader not only recover from a fall, but how do you gain the support of others in your quest to come back and bounce back?
I think as a leader, the most important part is understand that an I'm sorry is necessary and critical, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Words, once you lose respect, words have little to no meaning, and you have to start rebuilding from the foundation up. And it is a conscious decision. A lewd Facebook post, we've all done it. You have a group of friends and you have an inside joke or you make a glib comment about a sensitive topic. You don't even know that it's sensitive for somebody in your audience, and that's it. You're done. The relationship is ruined with somebody that maybe you're very close to, and you have to start at the bottom. And I'm sorry is necessary, But to think that there's a quick fix, it doesn't exist. And you have to stay pretty squeaky clean in the rest of your life. But part of the character, don't exceed what your character can support, is maybe you just shouldn't be talking on those levels or talking about those topics because maybe you're not on true north yet. Maybe part of rebuilding that respect is starting with some self-evaluation.
As we close out, we talk every episode about the Jedburghs. Mm-hmm. We tie it back to the 3 things that they had to do every day to be effective. They had to shoot, they had to move, they had to communicate. Actually, you referenced it a little bit ago. I kind of laughed a little bit because I liked that. If they did these 3 things successfully every day, it didn't matter what challenges came their way. They would be able to focus on solving them because these were their foundational elements that they were skilled at. What are the 3 things that you do every day that allows you to be successful in all your endeavors?
Very last thing I do every night before I go to bed is I take the whiteboard off my pantry closet and I write down my must-dos and my wanna-dos of the next day. Whether it's take my daughter to gymnastics or finish a homework assignment or write a blog is what has to happen. Line, this is what should happen. So I make a plan. The first thing is having a plan. The second thing would be executing that plan vigorously. If I go to bed and set my alarm for 4 a.m. and say at 4 a.m. I'm checking my Army emails because I know I have documents that my soldiers need me to sign, but I hit snooze, I already failed for the day. Now, sometimes I go to bed and say I'm not getting up till 5 a.m. And that's okay too, but that's my plan.
A late start.
Late start, yes. So you've got to have that plan. You've got to build the plan. You've got to execute it. And then you have to be adaptable. That plan's going to go to hell somewhere between 4 a.m. and 9 p.m. There is no way that plan's going to actually work. Be okay with that and figure out how to maneuver around it. So I would say plan, execute the plan, and then adapt the plan.
Amazing. Love it. So the Jedburgh podcast, we talk all the time about the 9 characteristics of elite performance as defined by special operations and what we use to evaluate and recruit and select and assess talent. We tie them into any organization. Drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, effective intelligence, team ability, curiosity, emotional strength. I look at you and I hear your story and I've come to know you over the last several months. And I think drive comes to my mind. And we define drive as this need for achievement, a growth mindset, be better today than we were yesterday, be better tomorrow than we are today, continuous self-improvement. That's how I would define you and what you bring to our organization, our communities, and society in general because of the things that you've done and have shown us are possible.
Thank you.
You've said, quote, Ranger School was just part of my path. It was not an end state. I have a larger public voice because of graduating from Ranger School. My true failure or success is what I decide to do with that voice. If I can live by the Ranger Creed and set an example which brings our community together for a smooth gender integration, then that is the goal I'm striving for. So the final stanza of the Ranger Creed reads, readily will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight on to the Ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor. Well, you've proven that you do live and abide by the Ranger Creed. You have earned the tab. You bear the tab, as you mentioned. And although we have had tremendously different experiences in nature of our background, in our successful completion of Ranger School, you did it about 3 or 4 times. I chose the first option and completed in the one. We have that common bond. And that is a bond that anybody who has endured these types of earned events and earned criteria for success and designations, and whether that be Ranger School or Navy SEALs or Green Berets or MARSOC Raiders, or in the corporate world, being part of elite organizations that are changing the world, there is a common bond there for the people who've made it through. Your uniform from Ranger School is at the Smithsonian.
That's right.
And it will be used to tell your story and other women's stories of bravery and perseverance. You're an example for men, women, leaders of all levels to follow. I thank you so much for joining me here on the Jedburgh podcast. Rangers lead the way.
Rangers lead the way. Thanks, Fran.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh podcast. I'm your host, Fran Racioppi. We're brought to you by the Talent War Group, an executive search firm and talent advisory. We'll drive you to attract, retain, and develop top talent. With services like talent acquisition, leadership development, and keynote speeches, we work with you to create talent solutions to business problems. To get started, visit talentwargroup.com. Join us next week for a new episode of the Jedburgh podcast on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, the Talent War Group, and the Jedburgh podcast on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh podcast and the Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.